For sinister Airbnb nightmares, discover the terrifying truths revealed by haunted guests. The Carroll family was eager for their weekend getaway. Mark, Lisa, Mia, and Ben arrived at the charming farmhouse, nestled quietly at the edge of Maplewood. It seemed perfect until the lights flickered ominously just as they settled in. A gust of wind rattled the windows, and shadows slithered across the walls. Mia's grip tightened around Ben's arm as whispers wormed through the air. Mark tried to reassure everyone, but his heart raced, a cold sweat forming on his brow. Something felt wrong. They dug through the guestbook, where each entry held a flavor of fun but also hints of unease. One entry spoke of flickering lights and gleaming eyes watching from the woods. A chill ran down Lisa's spine. The town's locals had strange looks in their eyes, as if they held secrets too heavy to share. Those skinny figures lurking nearby did seem odd, whispering to each other like conspirators in the shadows. As the sun slumped beneath the horizon, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, rattling the old house like a haunted scream. Panic gripped Mark as their phones turned useless, searching relentlessly for a signal. The family huddled together in the living room, the flickering lights casting eerie silhouettes. Tension hung thick in the air, choking any laughter they could muster. Their breath caught when they discovered an old newspaper clipping stuck behind the guestbook. It detailed a family that mysteriously vanished decades ago, last seen entering the very farmhouse where they now found themselves. The article's ink felt like a metal weight in Mark's stomach as local folklore bubbled to life in Lisa's mind. Vengeful spirits, whispers of the earth swallowing the careless. They weren't just tales meant for frightened children. The next morning, Mark decided to seek help. Sheriff Hargrove appeared amiable enough at first, but there was something awfully predatory in his demeanor. "Best stay put where you are," he warned, a calculating gaze assessing Mark's fear. "You know how rumors can spin, don't you?" Mark felt hollow, the very fabric of trust fraying under the sheriff's indifference. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That evening, the weight of being watched became a paralyzing reality. The neighbors, mere shadows, hid with sinister intent. The walls felt like they were breathing, holding secrets embedded in every creak and flutter. Mia jumped at every noise, and Ben's cheerful facade began to crumble, revealing fear that danced in his wide eyes. As night settled in, darkness wrapped around the farmhouse like a shroud. What lurked in the corners, tapping at their sanity, began to stir. The flickering lights became intermittent, screams mingling with laughter, a malignant tapestry entwined with memories of past guests who never returned. Their attempts to escape this nightmare were met with a storm of physical presence that surged from beyond the walls. Amid the echoes of their flight, an inescapable question hung in the air. Who will be the next to vanish without a trace? The night thickened like smoke, wrapping its fingers tighter around the farmhouse. The wind howled like a wounded animal, thrumming against the windows. Inside, unease twisted like the shadows that danced on the walls. Mark paced the room, his breath shallow. It felt like the walls were closing in, each creak of the floorboards echoing a silent warning. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Ben nodded, his eyes wide, looking over his shoulder as if expecting something dark to emerge from the corners. Lisa had already started to put together a plan, a flimsy attempt at control. "We can't stay here. We need to find somewhere safe," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Mark hesitated. "The sheriff said to stay put." "Did you feel the way he was looking at you?" Lisa countered. "Mark, I don't trust him. If we're in danger, we need to leave." With each passing second, the tension escalated. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the silhouettes of trees that resembled skeletal hands reaching for the house. Mia screeched, pointing at the window. "Look, A shape moved between the trees, thin and tall, dressed in dark rags that flapped in the gusts of wind. Its eyes glowed, twin embers cutting through the night. The family rushed to the window, pressing their faces against the cold glass. But nothing remained, only the beating rain and the sounds of the storm. "We're not alone," Ben whispered, his voice barely above a prayer. "There's someone out there watching." Mark grabbed his phone, desperately calming his pounding heart. No signal, just barren silence, taunting him. "We need to do something. We can't just sit and wait." As they deliberated, a loud bang echoed through the house, rattling the very foundations. Fear surged through Mark, but he forced himself to appear strong. "I'll check it out," he declared, trying to disguise the tremor in his voice. "Are you crazy?" Lisa shot back. "What if it's one of those things?" Mark took a deep breath and squeezed her shoulder. "I'll be quick. Just stay here. Lock the door behind me." With heavy steps, he crept toward the back door, heart racing. The storm continued to rage, howling in his ears. He stepped outside, cold rain pelting his face, stinging like needles. The world felt distorted, an eerie shadow of the farmhouse he had known just hours before. Each second stretched painfully. The back of the house was a nightmare landscape, leading into the dark woods. It called to him an abyss of unknown terrors. The air felt thick, as if breathing was some small rebellion against the weight of dread pressing down. That he spotted movement again. Shadows shifted low among the trees, but nothing was human. Panic clawed at his chest as he stumbled blindly back inside. "Get in. Close the door," he shouted, slamming the door against the onslaught of wind, locking it tight. Lisa's eyes were wild with worry. "What did you see?" "I don't know," Mark gasped. "But we have to stay alert. We're not safe here." Just then, a soft thud echoed from the attic above them. They froze, each heartbeat pounding in their ears. A slow, creeping realization settled in Mark's gut. Whatever had taken the previous family had not moved on. It was still here, hungry, waiting. "What if it's looking for more?" Ben whimpered, glancing at the ceiling as though it might cave in under the weight of their fears. The sound came again, louder this time, a rasping, almost curious sound, like something dragging itself along the floor above. Mark's mind raced. What if they weren't alone in the attic? What if it wasn't just the storm raging outside? A new horror dawned on him, an instinctual terror that shattered his resolve. "We need to get out of this house," he commanded, panic rising like bile in his throat. But as they prepared to flee, another bang echoed down the hall. What awaited them in the darkened attic? Were they ready to face the truth of the farmhouse? Or would they become the next whispers in its history? The wind shrieked louder, an agonized wail that seemed to echo their fear. Mark's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He glanced at the others, desperate for some sign of bravery or even resolve. But all he saw were faces paled by dread, eyes reflecting a raw terror that matched his own. Another thud reverberated above them, closer this time, like something heavy and unwilling was shifting in the dark. "We can't stay here," Lisa urged, her voice rising above the chaos around them. "We have to move now." Mark nodded, a firm resolution igniting within him. "Okay, but where do we go? The woods are just as dangerous." "The barn," Ben exclaimed. "We can barricade ourselves there. It might still have something we can use." They exchanged anxious glances, calculating the risks. The barn was just a short run away, but it sat at the edge of the property, exposed to whatever shadows lurked beyond. "All right," Mark said, steeling himself. "On three. 1, 2, 3. They burst through the front door into the storm, cold raindrops stinging their skin like tiny knives. They moved as fast as their legs could carry them, the farmhouse looming behind them like a predator waiting for its prey. Lightning flashed again, revealing the silhouette of the barn, its roof dipping under the weight of the storm, its doors hanging slightly ajar. They skidded to a halt. No chance to catch their breath as Mark pushed the heavy door wide. The creaking seemed louder than the thunder outside. "Anyone in here?" he called, desperation mixing with dread. The echoes of his voice died quickly, swallowed by the darkness within. They stumbled inside, rain-soaked and trembling. Mark quickly looked around, trying to assess their options. Old tools lay dusty in the corners, and the air smelled of mildew and rot. As Mark caught his breath, he could hear the rain hammering against the roof, a comforting sound that felt alien now, like a false sense of security. By the window, look, Mia cried, peering into the darkness of the barn's far corners. Something shifted near a stack of hay bales. Mark squinted, heart racing. His eyes widened as he discerned a figure hunched over, its form jagged and awkward, still like the pieces of a puzzle that had been forced together. "Mia, don't get too close," he yelled, panic straining his voice. But Mia was already backing away, fear flickering across her features as the figure straightened, revealing a gaunt face that seemed to shimmer with moisture, lips pulled back in a gruesome grin. "Mark," she breathed, eyes round with shock. The figure didn't respond verbally, but instead took a slow step forward, unnaturally silent, like a wolf stalking its prey. "Close the door," Mark shouted, but Lisa was frozen, watching as the shadow drew nearer. "Lisa, now," he commanded, urgency cracking through the tension. With trembling hands, Lisa shoved the heavy barn door, slamming it shut just as the creature lunged. The impact rattled the building, splinters flying from the door's frame. "They can't get in," Ben insisted, but his voice wavered, a thin veneer of confidence cracking under the weight of dread. No sooner had the words left his mouth than they heard it again, a skittering, that rasping sound now coming from above them. It was as if more than one of them was up there, rustling among the rafters, spilling over the beams, plotting their descent. Mark's mind raced. "We need to find something to defend ourselves with," he said, his voice a whisper as the panic clawed deeper. But as they began to search the barn, they felt the air grow colder, a presence looming just out of sight. And all at once, the rasping turned into a cacophony of movement. "We need to move," Mark gasped. But the barn doors shuddered violently, as if something from outside was desperate to break in. Just then, they heard a soft voice drift through the storm, echoing like a melody through the roiling darkness. "Let me in." The voice pulsed between them, and the very walls trembled with the weight of it. What lurked beyond the barn? Who or what was calling them under the storm's rage? The thrill of panic surged in Mark's chest as the voice seeped deeper into the musty air. What was that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes darting toward the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. "I don't know," Mark replied, forcing calm into his voice. "Stay together." But the tremble in his words betrayed his own fear. The only response came from the rustling above, a twitching of unseen things, like spiders eagerly awaiting the moment to strike. Mark glanced at the others, faces lit weakly by sporadic flashes of lightning slicing through the darkness. "Find something," he urged, scrambling to locate a tool, anything that could serve as a weapon. His fingers brushed against the cold handle of a metal pitchfork, and he grasped it tightly, feeling the heft of it. It would have to do. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the rafters, jolting everyone into heightened alertness. Something heavy had fallen, sending dust and particles spiraling through the air. "Get back," Mark shouted as a grim shadow teetered on the edge, barely illuminated by another flash of lightning. And then it dropped, something dark, long-limbed, its fingers ending in sharp claws that scraped against the wooden floor. It was a creature, gaunt and grotesque, its skin pale and slick with rainwater. The others screamed, clinging to each other in pure terror. "Back upstairs," Ben suggested, panic sharpening his voice. "There's a ladder." He pointed toward the shadows where hay bales stood piled high. As they rushed toward it, the creature hissed, a sound that clawed at their sanity. It was a warning, a promise of impending doom. The group shoved together, hurling themselves onto the stack, scrambling toward the higher ground. Instinct drove them up the rickety ladder that creaked ominously under their weight. The thick aroma of mold filled their noses, suffocating and heavy. Mark was the last one up, glancing back just as the creature's limbs reached for him, clawed fingers grasping the air like a fisherman lunging for a catch. He pushed himself up just in time and pulled the door shut behind him with a sickening shudder that echoed through the barn. Breaths came in quick, shallow bursts as they huddled in the loft, peering down through the planks, trying to discern what monstrosity lurked below. "Can it hear us?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Mark replied, gripping the pitchfork so tightly his knuckles turned white. "We need to stay quiet." Just then, the voice returned, richer, curling like smoke around them. "Let me and I can help you." The tone was almost melodic, laced with something sinister yet inviting. Mark's blood ran cold. "Don't listen to it," he rasped, but the others exchanged glances, desperation blending with intrigue. "What if it's true?" Lisa murmured, a flicker of hope gleaming in her eyes. "What if there's a way out?" "No," Mark hissed, feeling the anger boil inside him. "You don't know what that thing is." He was met with an unsettling silence that stretched, heavy and thick as the air grew colder. Suddenly, the barn door below them rattled again, and something began to scratch at the wood with a sound reminiscent of nails on a chalkboard. The malevolent force outside was fighting to get in, and the words continued to echo inside the barn. "Let me and I will save you." Mark felt the walls closing in, claustrophobia replacing the fleeting adrenaline. "We need to make a decision," he shouted, his heart racing. Stay or trust the voice. But as they weighed their options, another clap of thunder roared overhead, and from the darkness below skittered a second figure, joined by the first, both eager for their offering. The decision loomed before them, peril pressing heavily against their will. Just when Mark thought he might collapse under the pressure, the loft creaked ominously, and he realized one frightful truth: there was nowhere left to hide. Which would it be? Salvation in the voice, or the lurking doom of the figures below? Mark held the pitchfork like a lifeline, its metallic surface slick with sweat from his clammy hands. Every creak of the barn echoed their shared dread, intensifying the air thick with fear. The scratching grew louder, an insistent tap-tap-tap that seemed to mock their fear. With each plaintive sound, the voice outside dripped with seduction. "Just open the door, I promise to help you." "Stop it," Mia whimpered, her wide eyes darting between Mark and the hatch. "It knows we're here. We can't let it in." "Maybe it's telling the truth," Lisa countered, her voice trembling as her gaze fixated on the door. "What if it can save us?" "No, you're not listening," Mark snapped, his heart racing. "It's playing with us." Like he faltered, the words choking him emotionally. "Like we're toys. It wants to take us." The loft creaked again, and fear enveloped the group, a thick fog that stifled them. They all held their breath, wishing desperately for the thunder to cover their noise. It was a moment of fragile stillness before the storm. Then, a heart-stopping crash below sent them spilling backward, stumbling over one another. Hay kicked up like shrapnel as another shadow slithered into view, crawling with a disquieting grace. Two grotesque figures now stalked the barn, their long limbs undulating across the hay-strewn floor. Mark could barely process the sight, half monstrous and half human, both with eyes glimmering like polished stones. They moved rhythmically together, a twisted dance that made the hairs on his neck stand up. Just then, the first creature arched backward, then lunged, smashing into the door, banging and scraping furiously. Grains of splintered wood rained down on them. Mark's heart raced as lightning flashed and illuminated their grotesque features. Sharp teeth grinned in a grotesque smile, the skin wet and glistening. "Make a choice." The voice again was sweet, syrupy. "It's your only chance. Are we really considering this?" Ben snapped, panic clawing at his throat. "Pray tell us which is worse, those things or whatever lies behind the door." "No, we're not." Mark bit back, gritting his teeth. "We can't." But the voice was persuasive. "You're running out of time. I could keep them away." The second creature's fingers stretched toward a weakness in the wood, nails scratching furiously. With another surge of adrenaline, Mark moved to the edge of the loft, heart pounding. "We need to get out of here, now." As he peered down, he could see something glinting near the base of the ladder. A gleam that didn't belong. It was an opening, the gap between the wood so slight yet alluring a way to escape while the two figures were focused on the door. "Look, down there," he shouted, pointing. "If we can time it right, they could flee while the creatures were distracted. Or it could be a trap, Mia urged, shaking her head furiously. We can't just sit here, Mark insisted, his voice rising above the clash of thunder. But as he spoke, he felt the very foundation tremble underfoot. The creatures recoiled, aware of the shift in energy. Their heads snapped toward Mark, eyes glimmering with dark intent. The door is weak, you can give in to us, or face the depths of despair. Screams erupted as another powerful crash jolted the barn. The floor began to sway, the beams rattling ominously. Then another clap of thunder echoed, booming louder than ever before. The handle of the door creaked slowly and menacingly, as if prepared to grant entry to the chaos beyond. In a fleeting moment, Mark felt lost, ensnared between the voiceless allure and the looming terror below. His instincts screamed for him to act, but time slipped like sand through his grasp. What choice would they make? Would it even matter if they reached the door, or was their fate sealed regardless? The agonizing decision hung thick in the air as the lowest floor splintered under the weight of destiny. With a wrenching groan, the barn continued to tremble, sending more planks crashing to the ground. Dust motes danced in the air, catching the light of the intermittent lightning, illuminating the horror spreading across their faces. Mark's heart hammered against his ribcage. The creatures had stopped their assault temporarily, hissing softly as they searched for weakness, cunning, predatory. "This is our time," he shouted, his voice bold against the encroaching dread. "We can do this." 1, 2 The thunder chuckled, a booming laugh that rattled their bones. Time seemed to stretch, and seconds felt like eternities. "What are you waiting for?" Lisa yelled, urgency piercing through her fear. Now, as if governed by a sudden surge of collective courage, they scrambled toward the stairs. Mark led, pitchfork raised like a spear. Each step creaked and sighed beneath their collective weight, but every sound of labor was drowned out by the low growl of the creatures growing restless below. Mia tripped, hitting the ground hard, and quickly scrambled up. Mark whipped around, the instinct to protect overpowering his frantic desire to escape. "Get up," he yelled, adrenaline swirling in his veins. "Go. I'll hold them off," Ben shouted. "Are you out of your mind?" Mark fired back, feeling panic claw at his throat. "Just go," Ben demanded, and with that, he lunged towards the edge, thrusting the pitchfork downward at one of the creatures that had just begun to slither up the steps. It shrieked, a sound so bone-chilling that Mark felt the hairs on the back of his neck raise. They raced onward, disrupted by the chaotic wails reverberating through the barn. Mark yanked open the door to the loft just as a shadow lunged up behind Ben. The silhouette formed a monstrous face, teeth bared and dripping with something dark and viscous. It lunged forward. Ben stumbled, but the creature took a bite, a sickening, gruesome sound that would haunt Mark's nightmares. "Go!" Ben's shriek echoed as he was swallowed into darkness. The smell of iron filled the air, tainting their escape. "No!" Mia screamed, her eyes wide with disbelief. But there was no time to mourn. Mark grabbed her and Lisa, pulling them frantically down the rickety ladder. They pushed against the door, the very air seeming to thicken with dread. "That way." Lisa pointed toward the far side of the barn where a narrow exit gaped through a frame of rotting wood. The shadows danced more sinisterly at its edges, as if they were alive, urging them closer. They dashed for the exit, but the creatures peeled off the walls, merging back into the shadows, their hunger palpable. Mark felt frozen, his mind splintering under pressure. Would they even make it out? But with the echoes of Ben's screams rattling in his ears, they had no choice as they reached the opening. A sudden calm washed over the storm-racked barn. An eerie silence fell, as if the creatures were watching, waiting. Beyond the door was an almost otherworldly shimmer, beckoning them forward with false promises of safety. Mia hesitated. What if they're just playing with us? What if it's a trap too? Better to find out than to stay here, Mark countered, pushing her through the door first. They stumbled into a darkened alleyway, the shadows swallowing them whole. Ahead, the night stretched ominously, devoid of any light or hint of salvation. The barn loomed unnaturally behind them, and the creature's hisses echoed in the distance, urging them back. And then, from behind them, the sweet, syrupy voice drifted through the air, a haunting melody that lured them back. You think you've escaped? The game is just beginning. Without warning, the ground shifted beneath their feet, a rumble that felt like the heartbeat of something monstrous below. What lay beyond the darkness? As each of them turned back toward the looming structure, dread settled over them like a heavy blanket. What would happen when the night was over, and what had they truly freed themselves from? The deeper horrors awaited just beyond the threshold. Would they dare to confront them? The moment they turned back, the barn stood looming over them like a gaping maw, and that haunting voice twisted their stomachs with primal fear. This way it cooed, enticing and sinister all at once. Mark felt a chill slither down his spine. We can't go back, he gasped, pulling Mia and Lisa further into the alley. Though the air felt heavy, thick as molasses, as if the night itself clung to their skin. We have to keep moving. The shadows at the mouth of the alley seemed to shift, elongating and contracting, almost alive. The faint glow of the barn began to pulse in rhythm with the dreadful heartbeat beneath their feet, threatening to draw them back into its darkness. They're coming, Lisa whispered, her voice quavering, barely breaking through the dread that gripped them. Mark could hear what was left of Ben's last scream ringing in his ears, a desperate, fading memory lost among the rustling leaves and the unrelenting whispers of the night. What do we do? Mia's voice trembled, her eyes flickering around, searching for escape. But everywhere she looked, the shadows seemed to stretch, creeping closer, suffocating any hope of safety. Mark glanced down the alley. There was no clear end, but there was no way he could stay here trapped between fear and the unknown horrors lurking behind. We fight. It's all we can do, he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. As they moved deeper into the alley, a damp, chilled breeze swept past them, carrying the faint scent of decay mixed with something sickeningly sweet. Each breath felt like inhaling a dark cloud. Mark turned his back to the barn, forcing himself to focus on what lay ahead. Suddenly, the ground beneath them quaked violently, and Mark stumbled. He braced himself against the wall, leaning heavily on the cracked stone. Hold on, he yelled, trying to keep his footing. Mia and Lisa gasped, eyes wide as they watched the shadows twist and churn, forming grotesque shapes. Emma pressed up against Mark, her icy hand gripping his. This can't be real. It is real, he shouted back, his voice fierce, cutting through the fog of fear. We have to face it. The shadows seemed to whisper secrets, luring them with every flicker of movement as they further inched closer. What if we're already trapped? Mia's voice cracked as panic surged through her, spilling every unsaid fear into the night. Mark wanted to say something, anything reassuring. But there, in the distance, emerging from the fog, he caught sight of someone. A figure stepped into the dim light, half obscured and cloaked in darkness. But there was no denying the long, glistening blade that hung at their side. Every instinct screamed at Mark to run, but as that reflection caught the light, he realized the figure was not there to help. The blade dripped with a thick, crimson fluid, reminiscent of Ben's final moments. Run! Mark shouted, breaking the spell of fear that had momentarily entrapped all three of them. They dashed off with adrenaline coursing through their veins, but every instinct told them it was futile. The shadows followed, creeping ever closer. Where do we go? Lisa cried, the breath knocked out of her as she stumbled on a rock hidden in the darkness. Just keep going, Mark urged as they navigated the alleyway, their steps echoing against the stone walls. They spotted a flicker of light at the end. Was it real? Was it freedom? Or another trap? As they sprinted toward the glint of hope, Mark dared a glance behind. The shadowy figure was gaining ground, and the melody of that haunting voice filled the air again, now layered with laughter. You can't escape, you're part of the game now. With every step they took, the reality blurred. Would they reach the light, or would they be swallowed whole once again? Ahead, the light pulsed, almost alive, beckoning them on. But Mark's heart raced. What if it was the very thing waiting to ensnare them further? They were running toward salvation or their final doom. Would they be able to outrun the monsters chasing them, or were they only running deeper into despair? The light ahead flickered, like a candle dancing in a storm. Each pulse teased them, promising safety but also drawing them closer to the shadows that pursued. Mark could feel the tremor in his legs, each step feeling heavier, as though the ground itself was intent on anchoring him down. What if it's a dead end? Mia's terrified whisper cut through the eerie silence. Panic laced her words, her face pale in the moonlight. Then we'll find another way, Mark gasped, forcing his legs to move faster. Behind them, that sinister laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls, each snicker like icy fingers digging into their bones. The distance to the light seemed to stretch impossibly, a mirage teasing escape. Just a bit further, he shouted, trying to rally their fading courage. But doubt gnawed at him. What if this light was just another trick? With every fleeting moment, Mark's heart raced. He could barely distinguish the breaths from his friends, their stuttered gasps blending into one consistent note of fear. All he could hear was the rhythmic pounding of his heart and the voices that beckoned from the darkness. Suddenly, Lisa let out a strangled cry. She had stumbled again, falling to her knees. I can't, she struggled to catch her breath, her hands clawing the dirt. Get up, Mark urged, reaching for her. The shadows pressed against them, swirling and stretching with malicious intent. The flickering light seemed to dim with her hesitation, a warning that time was running out. Reluctantly, Lisa clawed her way back to her feet, her breath frantic but her eyes wild with determination. Go, go, she cried, turning them back towards the ominous glow. They wouldn't let despair win. Reaching out, they formed a line, Mark gripping Mia's wrist, pulling her forward, while Lisa staggered alongside, their movements frantic and jagged. Yet, as they pressed ahead, the ground beneath them began to rumble more violently. The shadows roared, and a surge of dark energy swirled, attempting to knock them off balance. Stick together, Mark yelled, feeling the cold, malicious presence close in. Just beyond the shadowy figures, the glint of that deadly blade caught glimmers of moonlight, swirling like a predator ready to strike. They stumbled ahead, the light growing closer. Mark wanted to dive into it to feel warmth and safety, but something deep inside him warned against it. What if it's a trap? He wondered, head racing. Almost there, Mia shouted, her voice filled with desperation. And then suddenly, everything changed. The ground burst open beneath them in a violent crack. A maw like the barns yawned wide, dark and hungry. Mark barely managed to leap aside, dragging Mia and Lisa back with him as jagged rocks and shadows erupted from the step. It was like a scene from a nightmare, the earth tearing apart to swallow the darkness whole. Run! He yelled yet again, tears blurring his vision as Lisa gasped in horror. If we fall in, we won't come back. Just as they regained their footing, the laughter grew louder, shriller, innocent yet tainted. You can't escape it echoed around them, biting into their brain like shards of frost. Then, from the depths of the darkness, an inescapable figure emerged, shrouded by shadows but unmistakable, more human than they had expected. The blade gleamed like firelight in its grip, one purposeful step at a time, closing in on them. Not this time, Mark said, desperation fueling every fiber of his being. It was do or die, fight or surrender. The choice was painfully clear as he turned, preparing to face what awaited them in the light ahead or to challenge the horror at their backs. But would that light still be there, or would they face a deep, eternal darkness? With a defiant roar, Mark pushed forward. What awaited them on the other side? Would they discover the truth behind the darkness or join Ben in silence? Mark surged toward the flickering light with all the adrenaline pumping through him. The shadows twisted behind them, writhing and groaning, as if the very fabric of the night was alive and desperate to claim their souls. He could hear Lisa and Mia's footsteps faltering, fear clawing at them like the shadows trailing behind. Keep moving, he shouted, pulling them forward. The warmth of the flickering light felt like a beacon against the encompassing dread, though a thick fog of uncertainty wrapped around his thoughts. Mark's mind raced. What if the light was a ruse, a trap laid by the shadows that hunted them? The laughter echoed again, a cacophony of distortion. You think you can escape? Carried a mocking tone that bit through their panic. The voice was familiar, taunting like a cruel joke, sending a shiver down Marcus' spine. It reminded him too much of Ben, their friend lost to the darkness. As they drew closer, Mark glanced back. The figure leading the charge through the dark was now clearer, the blade glistening ominously. The way it sliced through shadow made it seem alive, as if feeding on the darkness surrounding them. Just then, the figure made eye contact with him. Those eyes, cold and penetrating, sent a jolt through Mark's veins. He stumbled briefly, but regained his stride. They couldn't let the fear win. "Lisa! Mia!" he gasped, trying to drown out the laughter reverberating through the trees. They had almost made it. He could see the lightest source now, a door, slightly ajar, spilling warm illumination onto the ground, beckoning them like an unholy invitation. "Come on, we're almost there." But Mark felt himself being pulled back, a heavy hand grasping at his ankle. "Shit!" He turned, panic surging as he found Lisa struggling to free herself from the creeping shadows that coiled around her legs. "Leave me. Just go," she screamed, terror lacing her voice. "No," Mark screamed, rushing back. He wrenched her from the ground, pushing past the tendrils of darkness that yanked at his limbs, threatening to drag him down. The shadows writhed, angry at the disruption, slashing through the air like a whip. "Run," he urged, forcing Lisa forward. Mia's face twisted in horror. She looked torn between helping and running. "Don't look back," he shouted, and at last, the three of them broke free from the malevolent grasp of despair, sprinting toward the light. The door stood open before them, and the shadows howled in protest. They dove through the threshold just as the darkness slammed against it, the air thick and heavy with a scent reminiscent of sulfur and decay. Inside, the warmth enveloped them, but something felt wrong. The light inside flickered, stuttering with a rhythm that sent a chill down Marcus' spine. The hope he felt was laced with uncertainty. The space was tormented by echoes, two melancholy whispers that danced through the air, an unintelligible melody that felt hauntingly familiar. "What is this place?" Mia gasped, glancing frantically around the room. Old furniture lined the walls, shadows clinging to them like cobwebs. A mirror hung crookedly, its glass dark and murky, reflecting nothing of the light surrounding them. "Is this where Ben?" Lisa trailed off, horror dawning on her face as she scanned the room. Then, as if summoned by their fear, a figure flickered into view in the corner of the room, just beyond the light's reach. It stood halfway obscured, cloaked in shadow, gripping a blade that glinted like fractured glass. "Welcome to the true darkness," it said, voice smooth and chilling, resonating deep within the confines of their minds. Fear gripped Mark like a vice. They had run, only to find themselves ensnared again, trapped in a sinister cycle from which they may never escape. And then the lights went out completely, leaving them standing in pitch-black silence. What awaited them now? Would the truth of their reality shatter their very existence? Or was there still a way out? The darkness swirled around Mark, Lisa, and Mia, a living entity that seemed to whisper their fears back at them. Marcus' heart raced, pounding against his chest like a drum commanding attention. He fumbled through the murky air, feeling for anything that would tether them to safety. "We can't just stand here," he shouted, his voice echoing against the cold walls. "Where do we go?" Mia's voice trembled, oscillating between hysteria and hope. "Is this it? Are we done?" "No," Mark barked, the urgency framing his every word. "There must be something, a way out." With a quick glance toward where the flicker of light had been, he made a decision. "We need to find that door again. It has to lead somewhere." They felt their way through the oppressive darkness, moving slowly but determined, their hands grazing the time-worn walls that seemed to pulsate with the weight of the past. Each whisper held a story, a history of despair and pain seeping through the cracks. Footfalls echoed softly behind them, shadows whispering promises of what could have been, murky figures mocking their retreat. "They're toying with us," Lisa hissed, fear sharpening her gaze. Mark caught her arm, urgency coursing through his veins. Keep moving. But even as they progressed, the air thickened heavy, like a fog of dread that threatened to drown them in despair. Mark felt hope slipping like sand through his fingers. Then, a sudden crack of thunder shook the walls, filling their ears with a resonant roar. Over here, Mia pointed as a flickering glow began to seep through a gap in the wall. They dashed toward it, adrenaline pushing them faster. As they neared, the light expanded and shimmered, a heavenly glow amidst the endless black, illuminating the path in front of them. Do you think it's safe? Lisa asked, doubt creeping into her tone. What if it's another trick? Mark hesitated, looking back. The shadows were closer now, creeping toward them like a tidal wave of darkness. He clenched his teeth, determination turning the doubt in his chest into steel. It's our only shot. We have to take it. In a moment of bravery or perhaps desperation, they launched toward the door, hearts pounding fiercely. As they reached the threshold, Mark pushed it open. A blinding light enveloped them, and for an agonizing second, he feared their attempt would collapse under the ridicule of darkness. But then they burst through. They stumbled into a vibrant room bathed in warmth. The air was sweet and clean, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic darkness they had just escaped. Mark, panting, looked around. The walls were adorned with cheerful paintings, the faint sound of laughter drifting through the air. What is this place? Mia breathed, eyes wide. Lisa stepped forward, hesitantly running her fingers along the polished table. This must be a facade, Mark cautioned, scanning for any signs of peril. This can't be real. But every piece of him wanted to believe it was just that, a dream escaped from the horrors they had faced. Suddenly, from the back of the room, the figure cloaked in shadow from before emerged. But this time it looked different, its blade now a sunlit reflection instead of darkness. Welcome, it said, its voice smooth like melted sugar. You made it, but you're not done yet. What? Mark whispered, confusion lacing his voice. What do you mean? The figure smiled, a mix of warmth and unsettling chill. You escaped the darkness, but the true test lies ahead. This space is merely a facade, ensuring you confront your deepest fears. Only then can you truly leave. What if we don't want to? Lisa countered, bravely stepping forward. Then you'll remain trapped in its embrace forever, the figure replied, its tone dipped in honey but laced with sinister undertones. Mia gripped Marcus' arm, eyes wide with terror. We can't do this again. But a strange calm washed over Mark as he met the figure's gaze. No, he said firmly, we will face whatever is thrown at us. We're stronger together. The entity smiled wider, its shadow twisting behind it. Very well. Choose your greatest fear. Only when faced may you leave. Marcus' breath caught in his throat as a dark mist began swirling around them, coiling like a serpent. The room pulsed with options, his greatest fears casting silhouettes around the walls. Let it come, he breathed, determination cementing his resolve. The darkness rushed at them, sweeping away illusions of safety, peeling back their shield to reveal anxiety, loss, pain, things they had buried. Mark clutched Mia's hand and felt Lisa press against him, their bond igniting a shield of strength. Together, Mark yelled, an echo of defiance rising in his chest. As the fears loomed closer, shadows shrieked, slicing through air thick with dread. But he held fast. With a sudden burst, they surged forward through the shadows, confronting visions of despair that threatened to ensnare their minds. Screams of anguish echoed but dissipated under their unified front. Mark no longer felt fear, he felt power. A moment stretched into eternity as they met the abyss, a maelstrom of sorrow and darkness, and in that confrontation, they forged their path forward, confronting the very essence of what sought to destroy them. And then silence. The luminous warmth enveloped them once more as the chaos shattered away into glimmering specks of light. They blinked at the sudden brightness, their surroundings shifting into a sunlit grove, blossoms dancing along the breeze. Mark turned to Lisa and Mia, breathless from the battle. Did we make it? Is it really over? Mia whispered, glancing back at the shadows that disappeared into shimmering specks. The figure stood behind them, its presence no longer threatening, merely a guide. You chose to confront what scared you most, and in doing so, freed yourselves. A weight lifted from their shoulders, releasing trapped breaths held for far too long. They stepped away from the remnants of a nightmare, ready to embrace whatever life had in store. We'll always remember Ben. Mark sighed, feeling the ache settle in his heart. But we lived. Yes, Lisa whispered, tears sparkling in her eyes. We lived. As they walked into the grove, sunlight warmed their faces and laughter bubbled free. Through shadows and despair, they had emerged, united and alive. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss any of our next thrilling stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. Show your support for the channel. Only true fans understand the power of these actions.